Hello everyone, I'm Eszter Vajda. Thanks for joining us and welcome to Hometown Talents and Treasures. Our goal is to introduce you to people who in their own unique way enrich, educate, empower, or inspire others in the community. And certainly my guest today does all of that by saving lives. Did you know that car crashes are the #1 killer of those under 45? My guest is Dan Strollo. He's the president and executive director of the In Control Crash Prevention classes, which are the first of its kind in the nation. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good to have you. I mean, I was just astounded by this. Car crashes are the #1 killer of those under 45. This is such a brilliant idea. Teaching people how to avoid crashes. How did this all come about?
Well, it's interesting because back in the 70s, the U.S. actually was the safest place in the world to drive. We had the lowest death rate per capita of any country out there. And today, do you have any guesses where we are?
10th?
I wish. We're about 40th place pretty consistently. So what happened in the 30, 40 years is we focused primarily on technology. And there's a lot of bells and whistles and some impressive technology that makes vehicles safer, but unfortunately we haven't focused a lot of energy on educating people how to take advantage of that.
And of course there's these
that's not helping
things,
things either. There's some other technology that's dangerous out there. But this type of training has gone on for decades in some European countries where they enjoy significantly lower crash rates. So the biggest point I always try to make is that we can improve. Some folks think this is just inevitable that we're going to have all these crashes. But the reality is if we focus on some education and a lot of other things that we need to kind of, as a community and as a village, do in order to keep everybody safe, we can really dramatically lower this. And I'll add, it is a very dangerous thing for all of us. It's the #1 unnatural cause of death, period. But for teens, I mean, if you look at the 2nd through 10th cause of death and add them up, it's barely going to approximate how many kids we lose in car crashes.
You mentioned on your website that there's a societal shift in attitudes towards driving in those countries where there's training. What do you mean?
Absolutely. So, the premise being, if I was to drive down Main Street here in town in a convertible with an alcoholic beverage in my hand, people are going to look at me like something's wrong. And in some of these countries, that's how people react to a cell phone being in somebody's hand. They take driving much more seriously. You don't eat while you're behind the wheel. If you owned a German car 10, 12 years ago, it didn't have cup holders. They couldn't imagine you were going to take your hands off the wheel to drink water, let alone anything else. So their societal attitude towards driving is very different than what we have here in the U.S. It is much more the privilege, and some of it comes from they have significantly more difficult driver's licensing requirements.
This is a half-day course.
Correct.
Open to anyone.
Correct.
You get into a car, get trained by some race car drivers.
Yeah, the program breaks down in that half day is everybody shows up, and we literally won't take more than 20 students in a class. And we just add vehicles depending on how many students are going to be there.
And this is not your own vehicle, this is a
very
vehicle.
Very good thing to say. We use our cars. We go through tires about every 7 days.
That's
so
incredible.
Thank God for Sullivan Tire, because they've been donating tires to us for a long time now. But yes, we use our vehicle. We're currently using Volvos that are the Volvo S60, which have been really good cars for us. But we've used Camrys, we've used Nissan products. The idea being we want a mid-size sedan, something that kids are going to be safe in. And then we immediately go out to the vehicles. And the very first drill that everybody's going to go through is how to learn how to sit behind the wheel. And it sounds kind of simple, but where your hands are supposed to be, where your body's supposed to be, how that seat should be adjusted, where your feet need to be planted. These are things that traditional driver's ed certainly cover, but they cover a lot of things very quickly. And frankly, we are at somewhat of an advantage because we're going to do this really neat thing with them. They're going to have fun, and a lot of these things really become memories as a result. Once we do this little seating
and they can wreck the car.
And no, they're not allowed to do that. But we get them in the vehicle and we demonstrate the first drill. And the first drill we do with everybody, and you mentioned, anybody can take this course. Our youngest student, we'll have some 15-year-old students from New Hampshire because we want to see them during the permitted process. So if they've got a lot of driving experience, seeing somebody while they're on a permit is good. We've also had 94-year-old students come through the program and everything in between. The very first drill everyone has to do is a highway speed panic stop. So they have to be traveling at between 50 and 60 miles an hour and then slam on the brakes. And basically, we're going to set up a little space for them to stop and put wall of cones in front of them. And we tell them when to stop, and then they have to stop as quickly as they can before they hit the wall of cones. But what happens is the seatbelt locks up, the wheel gyrates, the pedal pulsates, it's making noises, something they've never heard before. A lot of our students just freak out, and they take their foot off the brake, which is pretty counterproductive when we told them to stop as fast as they can. Once we set those cones back up, though, and repeat that drill, 100% of the time they stop well within the cones. They're not as intimidated by it. And once they've experienced it, and really a lot of what we're doing is providing that instinctual reaction. We're repeating things. Some of the other drills we'll repeat so that they have the muscle memory to be able to do it on their own when the time comes up. So our instructor will demonstrate drills first, and then we'll actually have the student participate in the drill. And this is what's interesting about this is you keep doing it till you get it. If God forbid you've come to us too soon, you know, a 16-year-old who got their permit 2 days ago is not who we want to see. We want to see a 16-year-old who's had their permit for 3 or 4 months and has been driving with the family, driving with traditional driver's ed, has some time behind the wheel. But if they still struggle, they can come back for free. Once they've gone through the program, we want them to pass. And the only example I'll give you on the other side of the equation is some of our older drivers we've worked with have decided they're not going to drive anymore. You know, we've had parents of teens say, this was a great program. I want my mom or dad to go through it and see whether they can safely maneuver the vehicle at home. And we've had people tell us, you know what, now that I see what could happen in an emergency, I don't know if I should be driving. And that's their choice to make. We don't report them to anybody or anything, but I think it's great to have an opportunity to see how you'd react under pressure versus a danger or tragedy that could happen because you don't know how you're going to be.
What about weather related? How are you able to assimilate? I remember living in Michigan, and it snowed every day there.
Yeah.
And
it does. I've been there.
And you know, the skidding.
Sure. So a couple things to think about. First and foremost, we're going to try to give you the best experience with how to keep control of the car in our everyday class. We do offer a snow class, and I'll talk a little bit about that separately, but the reality is a car behaves pretty much the same whether you're doing, you know, 40 miles an hour on ice or 100 miles per hour on dry pavement. So if I was to take an exit ramp at 100 and just start skidding off of it, that's the same as it might behave if I was to do it at a much slower speed, but it was covered with ice. So in our instance, we're going to have people go faster. And the reason is we want them to be going at a speed where they have to kind of wrestle with the car. So what we do is a slalom. Picture skiers going in and out of the flags. We go in and out of cones. And everybody at 25 miles an hour can pretty much handle the car without much of a problem. As we start picking up the speed, a few things happen. One is the rear of the car starts to lose adhesion. But because they're turning back into it, they turn into the skid. Do you remember hearing that?
Right.
Did it ever help you when you actually skidded?
No.
To say it is not necessarily going to help you.
Panic is the first thing that happens.
We're trying to provide instinctual reactions. So we're having you turn in and they regain control of the vehicle. So they're learning, we're kind of blueprinting it into their mind so that they'll know what to do. The other thing that's interesting about that approach is it's teaching them the right hand position. You know, no car is meant to be driven with one hand up at the 12 position and the seat way back, and it's just not safe.
And one hand on right.
Again, we'll get into those, I promise you. But 9 and 3 is where your hand should be. And the idea is there's actually a piece of the steering wheel called the thumb rail. And if you rest your hands there, you're going to actually be ergonomically correct. It's comfortable, and it will hold your upper body weight. But more importantly, it'll allow you the greatest travel distance before you'd have to even think about taking a hand off the wheel. And in an emergency, you don't want to take your hands off the wheel. You could lose a lot more control that way. And finally, there's this fancy new thing called the airbag. You know, that wasn't on cars 20 years ago, and an airbag deploys at between 250 and 500 miles an hour. So this turns into punching yourself in the face at somewhere north of 250 miles an hour, which is not,
Never thought about that.
Tyson barely threw a 115 mile an hour punch, so I'm not so sure if I want something twice as fast hitting me.
I keep mentioning the cell phone, obviously a big thing, illegal now in many states. Eating, putting on makeup, what else do you see as some of the worst things that you can do?
The distractions as a whole are, again, indicative of the societal attitude towards driving. The movement that we're trying to create is for people to take driving more seriously and for us to somehow get people to recognize the dangers. You would never glance at your phone, you would never touch your phone if you really appreciated what could happen as a result of you missing, 300 to 400 feet of pavement because you were looking down at 50 miles an hour.
There's so many accidents, and then this
let me stop you. one of the things I would encourage you to do, again, as a society, that we need to start off with is, let's not call them accidents. They're crashes. You know, an accident gives you the impression there's nothing I could do. As a society, we keep saying that.
It was an accident.
Well, yeah, but these are crashes. I mean, an accident was that poor woman on the way to the airport and the tunnel collapsed and crushed their car. There's nothing she could have done in that instance. But one of the two vehicles involved in most of these crashes could have avoided the crash. And
That's
so,
a great
you know,
point.
there's a million things we could do. But you're right. There are, we have to get to the point.
So it's out there. It's. I mean, are people not paying attention? Is it?
I mean, the crash rates in 2008 across the country went down dramatically. Any ideas what happened?
People weren't driving because they
the cost
couldn't,
of fuel went through the roof.
Yeah.
So that's one of the, you know, that we had seen a fairly steady increase, and some of it is a result of phones. A lot of it, I think, is also the result of, you know, cars have changed. We're in this cocoon, and we don't necessarily recognize whether we're playing with stuff or we just don't feel the road conditions the same way we did. We're losing contact with what's going on around us. So come 2008, unfortunately here in Massachusetts, we had just launched a whole new graduated licensing approach and changed some of the laws surrounding driver's education. So 6 months into the year, everybody's like, hey, look at all the lives we saved. Unfortunately, since then, it's gotten worse. And so those numbers are back on the rise, and cell phone use is a big piece of it. We're hearing substances, not necessarily alcohol, because there's a lot less alcohol involved in fatal crashes, but there's a lot of substance abuse that's going on now with young drivers. And again, these distractions. And it's not limited to the cell phone, but the cell phone's probably one of the worst ones, because they just, you know, get engaged in this technology and don't necessarily stay paying attention to the road. And it's not just texting. It's email, it's playing with the GPS, it's all these different things that you can do while you're moving. And frankly, speaking on the phone, even with that hands-free device, every research study that I've seen has shown that your brain is not focusing on the road. You're thinking of how that person's reacting to your conversation. And as a result, you can find yourself into just as dangerous a situation and crash because of it, yet had you just simply, you know, avoided that phone call altogether and made up for it later on, you would have been in good shape. And how often are we going on long-term trips where a call is that important? You know, I mean, every family, I mean, one of the disadvantages of what I do is I meet a lot of families who've lost teens, brain injuries where their kids are never going to be the same again. And not one of them has said, yeah, it's a good thing they got that call through. It's a good thing we got that text. It's just not the case.
It's not worth it. So Dan, you used to do marketing for enterprise rental.
I did.
You majored in film and communication. Now you're trying to help save lives. How'd you get here?
Very easily. I have 4 kids. I've got an 11-year-old, and I want 11-year-old, 10-year-old, 7-year-old, and a 4-year-old. If I think I got that right. I want the world to be safer for them. And I got involved in this because they were looking for somebody to help market it a little bit, and they had a long way to go there. And it's something where, I mean, I've talked to people in a lot of different positions in different places across the country about how difficult this has been. There have been a lot of people who have tried to change our societal view of driving, and I'd like to see us be more successful.
Kathleen McGuire, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
I just love the way you describe yourself, a mom with a mission.
Well,
2 kids driving age or getting ready to drive. How'd you get involved in this?
well, I took the course myself in order to get my head around teaching my children how to drive. And I was blown away by how much I learned and how much we all need this course. Our society needs this course. If we're going to make any headway in making the road safer and be able to welcome bicycles, pedestrians, joggers, dog walkers, and all coexist, we all need to get our head around and rally behind this safety mission.
What was one of the biggest things that you learned?
I think a respect for speed and understanding that I have incredible power when I'm behind my wheel of the car. I am driving at a breakneck speed, and I need to know how to control it. And once I do know how to control it, I can be empowered. I can feel safer. In fact, I can feel a reduced level of stress because I have a knowledge base now. I also think, going back to the course too, it also sensitizes you to the fact that driving is in and of itself, a multitasking activity.
Yeah.
You are working with visual stimuli, you are working with tactile sense, you are incorporating thousands of details that are floating around you at breakneck speed. That is multitasking, and we all achieve that when we're driving. To overlay more activities onto that only dilutes the quality of your driving. It only puts more stress on your mind and your thought process. We're kidding ourselves to think that we can do so many things and still drive safely at the same time.
As cars have improved on their technology, you know, now you can say something and it'll activate something in the car. GPS is now built in, phones are now built in. What else can cars do, car manufacturers do, from your standpoint, to make driving safer?
I'll give the manufacturers credit in that they've done a lot of enhancements that some of them, you know, I don't love the idea that you can update Facebook from the dashboard. That doesn't make a ton of sense.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, there's plenty of cars out there you can do it from. But, you know, they've added technology. And let me give you the best example, ABS. You know, so it's been, you know, I'm going to put you on the spot here. We haven't prepared for this, but do you know what ABS does?
Nope.
No. Okay, so you're in good company because there's a lot of people who don't. It stands for anti-lock braking system. And what it does is it stops your wheels from locking up when you slam on the brakes. So if you aggressively try to stop a car 30, 40 years ago, the wheels lock up, and then if you turn the wheel, your car is going to continue to go in the same direction you were traveling before you tried to turn the wheel. Today, if you have ABS brakes, and not every car has them, but a lot of them do, your wheels will continue to roll. And so if you turn the wheel, you can actually steer to avoid whatever it was you were heading towards, which is huge. Here's the problem. We introduced ABS brakes as a country. The technology, they kept statistics on crash rates for vehicles with ABS versus without ABS brakes. And National Highway Traffic Safety Administration thought, you know, back in the 90s, they were going to see a huge decrease in crashes. Didn't happen. We never taught anybody how to use them. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of technology out there. Some of it is kind of useless. I could tell you how to adjust your mirrors so you're never going to have a blind spot. Yet there are cars out there that will have a light that blinks to tell you if there's a car in your blind spot. And you know, how long is it before you're numb to that and don't necessarily see the light either? There's a lot of technology that we put in place because we haven't learned to be good drivers. There's technology in Mercedes vehicles and some others, power assist braking. When you aggressively get on the brake, even if you take your foot off, it'll stop your car because they think you meant to stop.
So basically there's no replacement for good driving.
It has to be included. You gotta be educated on how to be a safe driver. We can't take for granted the fact that it's a dangerous weapon and there's a lot of things going on.
That's very powerful.
Absolutely.
It's a dangerous weapon.
And I just want to add, you know, in the whole concept of teens making mistakes and this sort of, you know, speed is a relative thing, but it's a big contributing factor. And what people are amazed by, in our course when we do that slalom, they can get through the slalom in 33, 34 miles an hour. You go 1 mile an hour, 2 miles an hour faster, they lose control.
And that's really the hallmark of the course, because given that it's hands-on, experiential, the person feels and gets to become sensitized to the G-force. That can't be simulated in a computer game or in even in a simulator. You have to be on the road, experiencing the speed to understand what that feels like. And it's that muscle memory behind that feeling that is going to save your life.
Final thoughts, Kathleen, anything that we haven't mentioned that you'd like to add?
I think really at the forefront of our mission is to help people recognize that learning to drive is a process. It's not an event. And we've become so focused as a society on the event of getting that license and that day in the RMV and having that be the milestone and the picture on Facebook, and then we've really lost track of what that license is. It's a privilege. It's not a right. And in order to make sure that our children are contributors to the public good and contributors to our public safety, we as parents need to motivate ourselves and them to make it a really great learning experience.
Dan?
And I'll just tag on to that, and that, you know, I've got a son, as I mentioned earlier, 7 years old, Tommy. Took him to soccer on Saturday. You know, he's going to be playing soccer for the next 10 years, and every week he's going to get some additional education on it and put in hundreds of hours of this before he might play varsity. Our kids here in Massachusetts get their permit when they turn 16, and 6 months later they can be on the varsity roads by themselves with us, and they're not ready for it. And they may pass their test, and they may work with a quality driver's ed school, but at the end of the day, they need to do things like this program. They need their parents to be sitting in that passenger seat as much as they possibly can, and anything else that might be specific to your individual need. There's a lot of technology out there. There's a lot of things you can approach. Please don't feel like just because they have that piece of paper that says they're licensed that they're really a safe driver. It's going to take a lot longer than that. Talk about subsidies available. A lot of them can, get some insurance discounts. The cost of this program is the least of their worries. At the end of the day, almost everybody ends up paying nothing just a couple years down the road. And if I can help you avoid one crash, I mean, here in Massachusetts, it's over $4,000 for one crash, and about 75% of these kids crash in the first 2 years. The math is terrible. It's tragic. But if we can do a few things and start reducing those numbers, this course alone shows a 70% reduction in crashes. It's not foolproof, but that really can help you save some money. And then, again, there's a lot of other things we can do as a village to keep these kids safe.
Awesome. Dan, Kathleen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Esther.
Great program.
Thank you.
Please make sure you join our Facebook page, and if there is someone or an organization you would like to nominate to be featured on Hometown Talents and Treasures, email me. That email address is esternvajda@gmail.com. Remember, it can be anyone. The important thing is that they selflessly donate their talent and time to help others. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.